What is up, guys? This is QRem from the Trinity of Lift, and today I'm going to bring all of you guys my Pendulum Magician deck profile for this adjusted February 2016 format. Now, I originally actually was not going to bring this deck profile to all of you guys, but due to the fact that I decided to actually sell this deck off, I decided that it was just right to bring a deck profile of this deck to you guys before this deck actually left my hands. So without further ado, we're just going to jump right into the deck profile, starting off with the main deck as per usual. So we're going to start off with the Pendulum Magicians. First, it's going to be a fairly normal lineup of Pendulum Magicians. We have 3 copies of the Dragon Pit Magician because obviously he's going to be your out to a lot of established back rows, as well as something like Domain of the True Monarch. So he's again really good because he outs a lot of those floodgates that can really shut this deck down. And he's also a level 7, so we can use him for our rank 7 plays. Moving on, we have 3 copies of the Oath Dragon Magician, simply because he provides a lot of extra recurrence in our deck. He brings back a lot of the things that we do discard from our hand to the graveyard. So again, getting those back and making a lot of our plays free with his effect is really strong. And again, he's also going to be our preferred low scale in this deck as well. So we have 3 copies of him. Then, of course, we also have 3 copies of the Wisdom Eye Magician because he's going to be essentially acting as 3 more copies of every other Pendulum Magician in our entire deck. So again, because of that, we need 3 of him just to add our consistency in this deck. Moving on, we have a couple of one-of Magicians. We have 1 copy of Dragon Pulse Magician because you really want to have a monster-based removal sometimes in this deck, just because things like Majesty's Fiend can really ruin your day sometimes. So again, having a monster out is really important. So having the Dragon Pulse can really help out. We have the 1 copy of Yugioh Magician simply because I really wanted to have the option of making Odd Eyes Rebellion Dragon in this deck, as basically if you can make that with its full effect, you should be in a very good spot. So again, because of that, you basically have to run the Yugioh Magician in order to have that play access at all. So again, we have him. And then finally, we have the 1 copy of the Noble Dragon Magician for all of those Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon plays. So yeah, that'll be it for the entire Pendulum Magician lineup in this deck. Moving on to the other monsters, we go into 2 copies of Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. Now, I know this is a Pendulum Magician deck, and a lot of them run 3 copies of this guy, but I absolutely hated 3 copies of Odd Eyes. The simple reason is because I felt like I was drawing multiples of him way too darn often. Like, in testing for this deck, when I was testing 3 copies of Odd Eyes, I would just draw 2 copies or more of him just almost every other game, and I just thought it was crazy ridiculous how often it was happening. So kind of because of that, I did cut 1 copy, and then even though I did decide to cut the 1 copy of Odd Eyes, you won't ever really run into the problem of seeing him, just because in this deck I have multiple ways to search into my Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. So again, I felt comfortable just cutting 1 copy, so I don't actually draw I don't draw 2 or more physical copies of Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon in my opening hand. So yeah, we have 2 copies of Odd Eyes. Then of course we also have 1 copy of Performapal Skullcrabat Joker because he can search out almost all of our Pendulum monsters. And then finally, for the last Pendulum monster, we have 1 copy of Archfiend Eccentric, just because she's a very good out to almost everything. And again, she functions as an out very similarly to either Dragon Pit or Dragon Pulse, and again, just acts as kind of like another copy of both of those cards. So again, we have 1 copy of Archfiend Eccentric to round off our entire Pendulum monster lineup. Now then, moving on to some of the weird things I'm actually running. I'm actually running a couple of weird normal summons in this deck. We're going to start off with a little Madolchi engine, actually. We have 3 copies of the Madolchi Magiline, as well as 1 copy of Madolchi Angeli. Now, with Skullcrabat Joker becoming a limited card, I really felt like there wasn't a lot of normal summons that were very good in this deck, and I really wanted to have a few normal summons so that I could constantly have a normal summon, hopefully, or excuse me, ideally per turn. So because of that, I added in this little Madolchi engine simply because it adds a lot more removal into this deck, as I did notice that when testing out pure Pendulum Magicians, there wasn't a lot of removal effects in terms of monster-based removal effects. And because of that, I really wanted to just include this little engine because Magiline essentially functions as a 1-card rank 4, which also gives us access to Madolchi Queen Tiramisu, and obviously we all know how strong Madolchi Queen Tiramisu's removal effect is. So again, because of that, I felt like it was a pretty good idea to add in this little Madolchi engine because first of all, it gives us those extra normal summons in this deck, as well as it just gives us a lot more options. So yeah, we have these 4 cards. And then for the last few monsters in our deck, we have a little Dark Engine, which is kind of taking up the Pendulum decks by storm right now. We have 2 copies of the Armageddon Knight. We have the 1 copy of the Blackwing Zephyros, and then we have 1 copy of Tuning Magician. Now, again, this is just to add more normal summons into our deck to give us a few more +1 plays almost every turn that we get. So again, having the Armageddon Knight is really strong because we can use him to make 1 card rank 4s if we do have our set up Pendulum scale, very similarly to the Madolchi Magiline. But the other cool thing too is that because this deck can run Tuning Magician, because Tuning Magician is basically made for this deck, we can use Armageddon Knight to act as a 1 card play into Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. And I mean, come on, guys. 1 card plays into Trishula. That's pretty darn cool. So because of that, we are running this our Dark Engine to round off our entire monster lineup. Moving on to our spells, we start off with 3 copies of the Pendulum Call. Because, well, obviously it's Pendulum Call and it's really, really solid in this deck. It always will be getting us to where we want to be. So, of course, we have to have 3 cards, or excuse me, not 3 cards, 3 copies of it because we always want to see it in our opening hand. Moving on, we have 1 copy of the Odd Eyes Fusion. Now, I only include Odd Eyes Fusion just because, very similarly to Odd Eyes Rebellion Dragon and why I run Janke Magician, I run the 1 copy of Odd Eyes Fusion just because I really want to have access to Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon whenever I do run into the situation where I actually have to make it with the Odd Eyes Fusion rather than float into it like something with Odd Eyes Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. So, because of that, I have 1 copy of the Odd Eyes Fusion for that. Now, I don't like multiples of this. I did test, like, I think 2 copies of this card before, and it would come up so many times that I just didn't like it at 2 copies. Like, you only want to search it off of Sky Iris whenever you want to make the Odd Eyes Vortex, and outside of those instances, you never want to draw into it. So because of that, we do only have 1 copy of it in the deck. Moving on, speaking of Sky Iris, we have 1 copy of Sky Iris, but also to accompany this card, we have 2 copies of Terraforming. Again, Sky Iris is going to be the thing that will search us out into all of our Odd Eyes cards, so Odd Eyes Fusion and our Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, and obviously the Terraforming will be searching into the Sky Iris itself, so it's going to be kind of like we have 2 more copies of Sky Iris, which kind of makes us have 3 copies of Sky Iris, and then that means we have 3 more copies of Odd Eyes Fusion and Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. So again, because of that idea, we usually will never have a hard time getting into one of those Odd Eyes cards, again, just because we have a lot of searchability that can help us get into those cards ASAP. So again, because of that, this is the ratio I am running. Moving on to the other spells, we have 2 copies of the Wavering Eyes. I absolutely hated 3 of this card in this deck because a lot of the time you're going to be under Pendulum Call, and because of that, you can never use Wavering Eyes to be a combo piece for yourself. You're only going to be using it to disrupt your opponent's Pendulum scales, kind of similarly to what Twin Twister does. So because of that, I felt like 2 copies were just perfect because, again, you're going to be using this essentially as a Twin Twister in this deck that also advances your game state. So again, we have 2 copies of Wavering Eyes. Then we have 1 copy of Rhoda to act as our 3rd copy of Armageddon Knight. We have 3 copies of the Upstart Goblin because I really like my 37 card consistency. And then finally, we also run 2 copies of Chicken Game to also essentially make this deck a 35 card deck. But it's also searchable off of Terraforming to ensure that we never can draw Terraforming dead because we will have 3 copies of any given field spell and 2 copies of Terraforming in our deck. So again, with that ratio, we should statistically never draw Terraforming dead. So yeah, we have all of those guys to round off our entire spell lineup. And then finally, for the single trap that we run, I'm running 1 copy of Time Space Trap Hole simply because we are running Rafflesia in our extra deck. So again, we have to have this trap hole in here to make her live. Now, I will also say this word of warning, word of caution. I don't know how to say it, but like this note right here, I do side Treacherous Trap Hole, as this card is Time Space is really good in the Cosmo matchup and the Pendulum matchup, but it's absolutely god awful against Monarchs. So because of that, I do side the Treacherous Trap Hole because Treacherous is way better than the Time Space in the Monarch matchup. So again, just a little word of wisdom, I guess you could say, for whenever you're deciding over what trap hole to use in your deck. So that'll be it for the entire 40 card main deck. Moving on to the extra deck, we're going to start off with all of our rank 7s, starting off with the best guy himself. We start off with 2 copies of Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. Now, theoretically, you only ever are going to make 1 of this guys per duel because I never found myself going into the second copy ever. But you want to run the second copy again because you are running that Odd Eyes Fusion, and you basically need to run the second copy in the extra deck just because you want to be able to send it off of the Odd Eyes Fusion if your opponent did overextend, and then you can make Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon for free. So again, because of that, we do have to run the second copy of Odd Eyes Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. I'm going to get a lot of these Odd Eyes monsters names mixed up quite a bit, but yeah, we have to have the second one just for the Odd Eyes Fusion plays, so we can make the Odd Eyes Fusion play free. So yeah, we have 2 copies of Odd Eyes Absolute. We have 1 copy of Odd Eyes Rebellion Dragon. Now this guy is pretty cool because first of all, you can make him if you do the Janke combo in this deck, but it's also kind of relevant because it's a 3000 beater that you can summon off of the Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon floating effect. And if you made Odd Eyes, Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon with an Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon underneath it, there's a pretty cool combo that you can do that eventually uses this card to out a Cosmo Dark Destroyer on your opponent's side of the field without them getting a floating effect, which again is really, really cool. So again, we have to have him at 1 just for the instances where we need him for certain plays. Then for the other rank 7 that we are running, we're running 1 copy of Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon because he's kind of like the rank 7 Cowboy equivalent. Like if you make this card in the later parts of the game, you should be able to just seal off the game no problem because your opponent will probably have to activate multiple effects to out this guy, and because of that, you're going to be burning them for quite a bit of damage. So again, we have the 1 copy of Red Eyes Flare Metal Dragon to round off our rank 7s. Now then, for our entirety of our rank 4 lineup in this deck, we have 1 copy of Melocia Queen Tiramisu for extra removal. We have 1 copy of Castel because it's good spot removal in general. We have 1 copy of Performance Trapeze Magician to really help us push for OTKs, and this card plus Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon is a really, really strong board. We have 1 copy of Abyss Dweller for things like Atlanteans and Burning Abyss. We have 1 copy of Trapper Rafflesia because we have the time space in the main deck. And then finally for the last rank 4, we have 1 copy of Diamond Direwolf. Now, I'm going to say this, like, out of this entire rank 4 lineup, you guys don't see an Evil Swarm Nightmare, and that is simply because of the fact that mine did not come into the mail for some reason, whatever. Like, it's been a couple of weeks, and I'm starting to get kind of concerned where my Evil Swarm Nightmare is. So again, I just want to like let you guys know that I would have an Evil Swarm Nightmare in this extra deck because we are running that Dark Engine, but simply mine did not come into the mail today. I will be saying what card to take out in just a second for that Evil Swarm Nightmare, but again, that is the reason why it's not in here right now. Moving on to our synchros, we're going to start off with 1 copy of Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon because we need this for our certain rank 7 plays. We have 1 copy of Trishula, like I said, because we have a 1-card play into Trishula, which is really, really cool. We have 1 copy of Ignister Prominence because we can make this guy with our Tuning Magician in any of our level 7 monsters. And again, Ignister is still really, really strong, and it's also, again, like a synchro-based Melocia Queen Tiramisu. So again, it's never bad to run. And then finally, we have 1 copy of Clearwing Synchro Dragon to round off our synchros. Now, this would be the card that I would cut for the Evil Swarm Nightmare because I really don't find myself going into clearing like at all, but again, like I said, because I don't have the Evil Swarm Nightmare, this is basically just in here to act as a filler card. But again, if you do have an Evil Swarm Nightmare, I'd highly recommend taking this card out right here for that Evil Swarm Nightmare. So that'll be it for all of these synchros. And then finally, of course, for the final extra deck monster, we have 1 copy of the Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon for our various fusion needs. And then of course, finally, we have the tokens because I love showing them off almost in every one of my videos. Alright guys, so that will be it for my Pendulum Magician deck profile. I hope you all very much did enjoy. Now again, sadly, this deck will be leaving my hands probably in the next couple of days, so sadly I will never probably be able to bring you guys an updated version of this in future formats. But again, I just wanted to bring this deck to you guys today just because I felt like it was a pretty fun deck. Like, I had a fun run with it, like, for the, like, maybe 2 weeks or so that I did have it. And I don't know, like, depending on, like, if this deck for some reason gets cooler support in the future or it gets indirect support somehow, I might pick it up again. But again, who knows until then. And as always, I hope you guys all did very much enjoy this deck profile. And as always, this is QREM from the Trinity of Lift, and I'll see all of you guys later. Peace out.